Tools could speak. Could speak. How the story is worth repeating.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome aboard. We are getting ready for another Learning Torah session. I was just sent a video that women should have study groups, and we should make sure to encourage that not only men are learning Torah at a level that they feel comfortable, but also women should have their needs met in the sense that the Hashem's Torah, which is for all of Yiddish people, should be made available. So we're going to do that. Let's learn some Torah. And of course, we're learning Torah in a way that it should give us focus, clarity, strength, encouragement to do our part in making Mashiach our reality, to see it in every day of in every part of our life. And therefore, we look to Torah for that. Where else are we going to find that sort of clarity? So we're going to look at the 3 steps, starting off with what's going on in the calendar. From there, we're going to go at what's going on in the Parshah. And then we'll look for one practical, relevant life message from Torah's Chaim, Hira B'Chaim, Torah of life, and eternal Torah, living Torah. So with this week's in the calendar is a very exciting week. There are some big highlights. Let's just say that we're going to go out of order because we're starting off with what's happening right now. Tonight, it's already dark outside. It's already the 25th day of the month of Adar, which is a big day. It's a big day for Yiddish people. It's a big day for Jewish women. It's the birthday of Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka. Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, the unsung hero for many, many years, who made so many good things happen behind the scenes. Obviously, it didn't happen behind the scenes, but she made them happen from behind the scenes, and nobody even knew who she was almost. People would walk past her in the street and not know which Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka. I mean, if they would have known, the whole world would have turned over. This was Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka's life, and she dedicated her time to making sure that the people around her and the people she cared for felt good, were happy, and not just that they felt holy, and as we spoke last week, abstract, spiritual. They literally felt good, emotionally, good about themselves, whatever they were into. If someone was coming to be a guest in her house, she literally did research. So-and-so is coming, she would find out always in a secretive way, in a way that nobody would never get back. What sort of food does a person like? What style is the person into? What conversation would make them feel comfortable? And the Rebbetzin was so perceptive and so interested in what others were up to and how they felt. Today's a birthday. Tonight's a birthday. It's the year we start Kuf Chaf Daled. Sorry, the year 124th birthday would have been, which is Kuf Chaf Hey, the Parak of Tehillim. And at this time, it's a special moment. It's a moment of birth, of energy. And as we had in the Purim story, the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Zayin Ba'adar brings blessing to the entire month. Certainly, it's fair to say that the birthday of Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka is a big day for us all. It happens to be that the birthday campaign that the Rebbe launched, encouraging even the greatest Hasidim to not just have a farbrengen, but to have a party. And the Rebbe would ask him, "You having a party?" I mean, an average Hasidic elder, if you asked them, "You having a party?" They would look at you, "You crazy, a party? Talk to me, a shir. Tell me about farbrengen." The Rebbe insisted in calling it a party, so the people should feel like it's not about being abstract. It's about literally living Hashem in regular, mundane life in a godly way. So this is Chafei Adar, which is tonight and tomorrow, Monday night, Tuesday. It's a big day on the calendar. Okay, let's go back for 1 second. We're going to go back to Sunday, which was yesterday. On Sunday, we had the 23rd day of Adar. And on the 23rd day of Adar isn't necessarily a date that was commemorated throughout the generations, but it's a day that is mentioned in the Parsha. And what's amazing is we are reading now in Parshas Pikudei, we'll get into soon, about the time where Moshe Rabbeinu rallies up the Jews, they all donate, and the master builders complete the construction of the Mishkan, the first ever home for Hashem, and then they wait from the 25th day of Kislev, which we now have as Hanukkah, all the way through till Nisan, which is coming up. The Mishkan is ready built, waiting for a green light. And at Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it goes live, as we're going to read in this week's Parsha. But for 7 days before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, there's the days of training. How many days is 7 days before the 1st of Nisan? The 23rd day of the month of Adar, which means that this Sunday, yesterday, was the first anniversary of the building up of the Mishkan in training. Today is the second day, and as we get closer to Rosh Chodesh, we get closer to that day of where it actually goes live in the sense that Hashem. So there's one more important day on this week's calendar. It's not a very exciting, happy day, but it's an important day to mention, and it's the and couldn't speak. Rebbe's power, one of his influences, came, and he would give tremendous talk, arim and sichos in his power speech. A doctor, one meeting him, how is it that of all things that are taken from this great leader is his ability to communicate in the sense of speech? Ability of being the mouthpieces, bones, if you like. Thursday, tomorrow night, Thursday. Tomorrow's Wednesday, it's Tuesday. Wednesday night, Thursday. Adar. Chav Zayin Adar is the day the Rebbe had his first stroke. And 2 years later, to the day, Chav Zayin Afshin Nun Dalet is the anniversary the Rebbe had his. The day 27 carries with it tremendous empowerment to us. And be a part, spread forth the empowerment the Rebbe gave to us, believed in us, to study what he is, to live by it in such a palpable way that it's felt and it's expressed further to the people around us in our circle of influence. And the Rebbe would often say that although it's much greater, as in it's a higher level, if we are gifted things from above, it's much more precious when it comes from below. So if we are doing our part as mere mortal human beings, we're doing the best we can. That's our way of bringing the influence and the messaging of such an enormous amount of relevancy, of kedusha, of activeness for today's generation that the Rebbe shared with us. It's our chance to be able to propel it forward. Chav Zayin Adar, Wednesday night, Thursday. We also have Shabbos, is a very big Shabbos, because obviously every Shabbos is big, and because it's Parshas Pikudei, okay? But Parshas Pikudei happens to be the last Sedra in the book, the whole book of Shemos, which makes this Shabbos into
Shabbos Mevorchim.
Shabbos Chazak. Chazak. Someone just said, I can't see who it was, Mrs. Abrams, Shabbos Mevorchim, because it's the Mevorchim of the new month, the month of Nisan. And if that's not enough, we have a second Torah scroll brought out because it's the fourth. Of the 4 extra readings is Shabbos HaChodesh, which fascinatingly, talks about the very first mitzvah we got as a people, even before Matan Torah. It's a mitzvah that we were received whilst we were still in Egypt. And the mitzvah was given to us, guess on what day? It doesn't line up this way every year, but it does this year. It lines up this year. First of all, the Parshah we're reading about, the inauguration of the Mishkan, is this week's Parshah that happens in this week on the calendar. And Parshas HaChodesh, the mitzvah of marking the Jewish calendar by the moon's renewal. HaChodesh Azelachem, the renewal of the moon will be our counting. We will count to that month by month. Falls out on the exact day it was given, the 29th day before the new month. In this year, the new month will be, Rosh Chodesh will be on Sunday, which means the day before Rosh Chodesh, the day we read Shabbos HaChodesh, will be the day of the mitzvah we received as the first time ever as a people receiving the mitzvah of following a Jewish calendar. On that very day, the 29th of Adar, and which is the day before Rosh Chodesh. And now it happens to be, besides it being Shabbos Mevarchim, Shabbos HaChodesh, and Shabbos Chazak, and every Shabbos is good, it's also a day it would be called Shabbos Machar Chodesh, which is why the Haftarah. Shabbos HaChodesh is a unique Haftarah, but we will have an add-on of 2 psukim, the end, to include the Haftarah of Machar Chodesh. The day before Rosh Chodesh is a big day, Erev Rosh Chodesh, which is why in Mincha time we don't say Tzidkascha, because it's Erev Rosh Chodesh, even though it's Shabbos, we mark the day before Rosh Chodesh, that afternoon, as being a special day. Now, what happens to be that on Sunday, as we just said, is Rosh Chodesh, and before next year, we will already have celebrated and marked Rosh Chodesh, so we're going to mention it now. We're also going to mention that come Sunday, a couple of things happen. We will no longer say Tachnon till the end of the month, because it's a celebratory time. The whole month of Nisan is a month of Geula, a month of redemption. More specifically, the first 12, 13 days of the month correspond to the 12 special inauguration offerings that were brought by the Nisim, one tribe each day, and therefore the minhag is, the custom is to read or to say the Hiratzin of each day, the corresponding tribe that brought in that day. We read how the Nasi, the prince of that Shevet, brought their offering on that special day. And therefore the announcement is made in shuls, do not forget the Nasi. And of course, literally what they're saying is, don't forget to read the portion that talks about the inauguration gift of inaugurating Hashem's holy Beis Hamikdash with a gift of the prince of that day. But in a maybe more abstract form, what it's also saying is, don't forget the Nasi, there's a leader to the Jewish people. It's important for us not to forget that although we have to do the best things that we can do and be the best me I can be, we should also remember that the only way I can be the best me I can be is if I remember that there's a Nasi. And therefore the calling, do not forget the Nasi. So, Rosh Chodesh is coming on Sunday, and therefore we obviously have Musaf and Hallel, and in general women make a special day of Rosh Chodesh, and this is the month of Nisan, and therefore there's no more Tachnon, but we also in addition have the Nasi that we read each day, and that's going to be 12, 13 days, and then besides that you have the 8 days of Pesach. Add that together, you got the majority of the month. 12 plus 8 is 20, and 20 out of 30 we're not doing Tachnon. We take the whole month gets upgraded, and there's no Tachnon the whole month of Nisan. Okay, now there's one more thing worth mentioning, and that is the blossoming of the trees, because from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, if we go out and we see the trees blossoming, fruit trees, there's a special bracha that we make to thank Hashem for the creation of trees and the fruit that grow on it. And that can start from this Sunday. It's probably a good idea to go out in general, especially if you're working hard, or if you need a breath of fresh air. You have a fabulous, fantastical excuse to go out for a walk and find some fruit trees. It's a great place to be anyhow, and bring with a sitter or take with your smartphone or say the special bracha and thanking Hashem for giving us trees. By the way, the smartphone was a joke, unless you want to take it seriously. Okay. We're now going to go, at least don't laugh. We are now going to say what's going on in the Parsha. We spoke a little about what's going on in the week in the calendar. If you have something to say, please unmute yourself at any time. And I'm going to say that this week's Parsha is very easy to summarize because we've done Parshas Teruma, gave us the full rundown of the collection and of all the utensils, or almost all the utensils that were built. We had the Tzaveh, which told us all the different uniform pieces and filled in the gaps of the missing utensils. We then had a semi-bit in Kisisa, and then we had the whole of last week that discussed more of how the Jewish people did it. And in this week's Hadra, it opens up with the counting of the actual material that was donated, which is fantastic. How many charities actually are so transparent that they will tell you how much they brought in their fundraiser to the penny, and then tell you penny by penny what it was used for and where it was spent on. This is my Rabbeinu for you. We're building a house for Hashem. It's a very expensive project, and everyone's getting involved. Parshas Pikudei opens up, and the Moshe Rabbeinu says, I know you got to trust me, guys, but I'm not going to rely on that. I'm going to be so transparent. I'm going to tell you in detail how much came in on the gold, on the silver, on the copper, on each one of the items, and what it was used for. So you can see that the dollars are spent. The material has gone to the right cause. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu's opening to Parshas Kisisa. Sorry, Kisisa. Pikudei. We then have the names of the artisans, the fantastically blessed and gifted people. And by the way, they're called gifted. You know why people are called gifted? Why do we call gifted people gifted? No, help me out.
They're special.
Exactly. I know what you said, but it's exactly that. It's because our talents and skills are gifts from Hashem. And everything we have is a gift from Hashem. And these individuals were clearly gifted by Hashem because they were way beyond their age. And they were so talented. It was obviously and clearly, miraculously a gift from Hashem. And they led the jobs. This is Betzalel and Ahaliav. Betzalel was from one of the prime Shvatim in Levi, and Ahaliav was considered from Shevet Dan, from what was considered one of the lower amongst the ranks of the Shvatim, you could say such a thing. And the idea was there's no lower and higher. Everybody's in it together, and together with them and their teams, their assistants, they made all the clothing, the garments, and they made all the kalim, utensils that were needed, as was exactly listed in Parshas Teruma and Tetzaveh. But in this week's Parsha, we'll get a rundown. They made this. They made the apron. They made the crown. They made the hat. They made the tunics. They made the sash, the breeches. Each step, it says they made this. And it goes and lists out all those things. And when, at a certain point, everything is listed and the Mishkan is ready, and all its components are brought to Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu himself builds up the Mishkan. And by the way, there were people who scoffed and laughed. They said, the Mishkan's never going to work. It's not going to work out anyhow. Either because it's not going to be built right, and even if it is built right, Hashem's not going to really come and live in some human-built structure. What's that supposed to mean anyhow? And when the time came to put the Mishkan up, nobody could put it up together. Only Moshe, who Moshe Rabbeinu had communicated what Hashem had said. And Moshe Rabbeinu had that blessing from Hashem, single-handedly, was able to put up miraculously the entire Mishkan. Don't forget, you're talking about each beam of the Mishkan was 10 amos high. 10 amos high is roughly 15 foot tall. Logs of wood, big, massive, heavy pieces of wood. And they had to be lifted to be slotted into their sockets. It was a big deal. And Moshe Rabbeinu managed to do that easily. Not just once. He did it yesterday, the 23rd day of Adar, and 24th today, and 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th. Each day, Moshe Rabbeinu would do it, fold it up, and putting it back down. Moshe Rabbeinu also anointed all of the parts of the Mishkan, and he initiates the servicemen who are going to be the service people on behalf of all the Yidden, and that is Aaron and his 4 sons. And part of that was also to bring the Karbanis, but also that was to train them how they were going to have to run the show on their own. Eventually, after all the 7 days inauguration, eventually on the 8th day, when Aaron comes and does the Avodah, on that day, the Shekhinah rests and dwells upon the Mishkan in the form of, one could literally see a cloud of glory, divine presence, descend upon the Mishkan. And you can imagine the excitement that was amongst all the Yiddish people when they actually witnessed that happening. Last week, when we speak in Parshah Vayakel, we spoke quite a bit about how Rashi teaches us that the Mishkan was in response to the sin of the golden calf. Other commentaries, as we said last week, like the Ramban, suggest that the Mishkan was always going to be. It was just once they had done the sin of the golden calf, the Mishkan became even more needed, even more necessary. Rashi says much more than that. Rashi says, "En muktamum ocha b'Torah." The order that the Torah tells the story is jigged up because it didn't actually happen that very way. Although the golden calf part of the story is sprinkled into different parashas, it actually all took place before the first instruction of the Mishkan. And after Hashem saw what a mess could take place, how unwelcomed Hashem could be made to feel amongst the people, he says, I want to make sure there's always going to be a place that will be my house. And therefore, it wouldn't have to happen that Hashem leaves the camp and needs Moshe to bring him back in. And therefore, Hashem says, make the Mishkan. And if that's the case, the Mishkan becomes the symbol of forgiveness. Imagine what it would have felt like to all the Yiddish people when the lights switch on. The machine starts, if you like. It's not a machine. But everything they'd worked for and invested into and built, and it taking them a whole bunch of months just to wait it out, to get the green light to put it up. And then 7 days, it goes up, and they're going through the motions, and they don't feel a thing. They don't experience any difference. And then all of a sudden, with their own material bodily eyes, their entire being experience and watch and witness the descent of Hashem's Shekhinah upon the Mishkan. This is Parshas Pikudei. And in this week's Parsha, we remind ourselves that even if we haven't yet experienced a revelation, a personal uplift where we feel connected, if we're doing the right thing, Hashem guarantees, I am there with you. I'm dwelling in it because you're making a house for Hashem. And that's this week's Parsha. Parshas Pikudei, Chazak, Chazak, V'nes Chazek. Okay, so this is a summary of the Parsha. It wasn't a very long Parsha, but as you can imagine, any Parsha, certainly a Parsha like this, talking about the house of Hashem, the house of Hashem going live, Moshe Rabbeinu's miracles, there's loads to be said. We are going to focus, though, not on a specific part of the Parsha. We're going to talk about a very general question that is asked by so many commentaries on the Torah. And our question is going to be, not that question, but our question is going to be, how come Rashi doesn't ask such an obvious and glaring question? Remember we said, Rashi's your friend on the page. So if you don't understand what's going on, check Rashi. But if there's a glaring and obvious question that Rashi doesn't answer, that becomes the backwards problem. Well, hold on 1 second. How come Rashi didn't help us on this one? Obviously, there's something to be learned from the fact that Rashi doesn't consider this a question even. Or he's already given us the answer somewhere. And that's where we're going with it. So before we get into the actual Rashi, these are the rules of the page. Rashi rules. Rashi addresses every basic question in the text. If he is silent, it means one of two things. Either it's not a question to begin with, for whatever reason, he's explained, or it is already addressed by a comment he made earlier. Okay, that's going to be our observation. And there's one more, the precise word the verse actually cites in the header. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay, here's the exercise. The exercise for today says, do you have a story about yourself that you enjoy repeating? And if yes, why? Now, you don't have to share the story. I'm just asking if you can relate to this concept, either for yourself or somebody who you respect. I'm not going to say somebody you know, because we all know somebody who has a story that they repeat over and over again. But we're asking somebody who you respect. So we're not looking for a story that's, and you say Bob and my say in English. I don't know. But let's just say if you have a story that's a important story, and I'm not just telling it over because I like to hear my voice. I'm saying it over because I think it's a great story. Or somebody I respect tells me the story and they hear it tell to somebody else and to somebody else, and they're going on about it. So if you can relate it, just say yes. If you have a story yourself or somebody you respect has a story, they often say. I'm getting some nods. Okay. I'm going to ask you, if you think for a moment, why? Why would somebody tell a story and then say it again and then say it to somebody else and live with that story? What does it tell us about them and the story?
It's an important story.
Okay.
You
Say
want
more
other
words.
people to hear it.
Okay. Why would it be? What would be important? Let's use a different
Maybe
word.
other people could learn from it, or maybe it would be a story that would make somebody happy, or it could be something that you think could maybe half solve a problem for somebody because you're sharing something else that's happened. So
Wow. So it's
there are
a
all reasons to tell.
educational, empowering.
Okay. Mm,
Maybe it can give us also direction when
yeah.
someone's got a problem. Fantastic. That's great. Three great reasons that somebody might have a story and they'll say it to one person, another person. Anyone want to add to that? I was going to say disagree, but I can't
Well,
imagine you disagree to that.
if we look at the Hasidic stories, it depends what spiritual level you're on. But I sent one to someone in prison, and he shared it with other people in prison, and they really discussed it and enjoyed it. So, these Hasidic stories are both spiritual and they lift the spirits as well, and they
Amazing.
teach about Hashem, doesn't it, and our way of life.
Very much similar to what Mrs. Abrams was just saying. Absolutely. You just reminded me. And my father for Brengens would often have fixed stories that you could almost expect over the course of a Farbrengen, they would come up somewhere. And the idea is very similar to what we said, either educational, empowering, or the directional. Anyone else want to add? Thank you for sharing. Anyone else before we go forward? Oh, someone's unmuted. Go ahead. Anyone else want to say? Going once, going twice, third time solved. Okay. If you want to unmute Alt A, or if you're on your phone, it's *6. Oh, I think. I think it's *6. Okay. We're now going to jump into what this week's Parsha has to say about a story that is so important. And we're going to find sometimes, in certain ways, it's even more important than some things like the technicalities and the detail of even the most important mitzvahs. In a way, will come secondary to these empowerments, these educational and directional stories that we have, as the Torah will show us how it repeats it. Let's start off with this week's Parsha's opening psukim. I'm going to ask you to notice, we are going to read not every verse, but we're going to read snippets. And as we flow through sections of this week's Parsha, you'll find that the question is going to jump out at us. Everything we're about to read has been taught to us, not just once, not just twice. It's been written in detail over and over again in how Hashem tells Moshe, and Moshe tells Jewish people, and the Jewish people carry it out. And again, it's been telling us the same thing. Here's the pasuk. And Moshe spoke to the entire community of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the word that Hashem has commanded to say: Take from yourselves an offering for Hashem. Every generous-hearted person shall bring it, namely God's offering of gold, silver, and copper." So you have Moshe speaking to the entire community, and he's saying, "This is what Hashem has commanded us." What has He commanded us? Almost direct quote from Parshas Teruma, when we read that Hashem actually spoke to Moshe. The verses then continue, verse 10, and every wise-hearted person amongst you shall come and make everything that Hashem has commanded. So the artist is just step forward. And who should lead? Next chapter, Batzal and all of every wise-hearted man, into whom Hashem had imbued wisdom and insight to know how to do so, shall do all the work of the holy service of the holy according to that Hashem has commanded. On the slide. Then all the wise-hearted people, the performers of the work, made the Mishkan out of 10 curtains. The Mishkan here means the curtain top of the roof, consisting of twisted fine linen, blue, purple, and crimson wool. A cherubim design, the work of a master weaver, he made them. Verse 14, and then he made the curtains of goat hair for a tent over the Mishkan. He made them 11 curtains. He made the planks of the Mishkans of acacia wood upright. He made the dividing curtains of blue, purple, and crimson wool and twisted fine linen, the work of a master weaver. He made it in a woven cherubim design. And for the next chapter, Batzal made the ark, acacia wood 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 wide, 1.5 high. Next chapter, keep rolling, and he made a table of acacia wood 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide. Etc., etc. Piece by piece. Sorry, we skipped. After we list all those things, right at the end, he says, these are the numbers of the Mishkan of the testimony, which were counted at Moshe's command. This was the work of the Leviim, under the direction of Isamar, the son of Aaron the Kohen. And out of the blue, purple, and crimson wool, they made the meshach garments, serving the holy, and they made Aaron's holy garments. By the meshach garments are the covers that would cover over the utensils when they traveled. Aaron's holy garments, as the Lord had commanded Moshe. All the work of the Mishkan until the meeting was completed. The children had done it according all that Hashem commanded Moshe, so they had done. What's fascinating about Parshas Pikudei, if you had to find the sentence that is repeated the most in this week's Parsha, the sentence is, as Hashem commanded Moshe. It's said so many times in this week's Parsha, as Hashem commanded Moshe, because we've actually read how Hashem commanded Moshe. And what we're reading is that they carried each item and each action point out exactly as they were instructed to do. Amazing. Rashi has an interesting observation and says, as Hashem had commanded Moshe, why doesn't it say, as Moshe had commanded the Jews? Because at the end of the day, that's the level of the chain we're up to, where actually the Jews are fulfilling what Moshe had told them to do in the name of Hashem. And Rashi points out that actually there was an interesting difference between what Moshe told the Jews and what Hashem had told him to tell the Yidden, and Bezalel picked up on this discrepancy, pointed out to Moshe, said, Moshe, do you possibly mean to do it a different way around? And Moshe was so excited. He said, Bezalel, your name fits you. What's the story? Hashem said to Moshe, they should build the building, and then they should build the utensils that go in the building. But when we read it in the Parsha, Moshe first tells the people to build the utensils, and then he tells them to build a house. And Bezalel says, Moshe, I'll do whatever you say. But doesn't it make sense first to build the home? So you don't have this gorgeous gold ark and menorah standing out in the open until we finish building the house. Shouldn't we first build a house, and when the protection is ready, then we'll build the utensils and have where to bring into? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, Bezalel is such a gorgeous name for you. It fits you. You were like in the shadow of Hashem. Your neshama must have heard what Hashem was telling me. There's no way you could have known. It's exactly what Hashem has said. You're right. Do it that way. And therefore the pasuk says, not as Moshe commanded the people. It alludes to this idea by saying, as Hashem had commanded Moshe, they did it the right way around. Fascinating. Okay. But it's definitely the most repeated line in this week's Parsha, over and over and over and over again, for each line item, as Hashem had commanded Moshe. Okay. The question, the most glaring question, becomes, why does this Parsha repeat the information already given in earlier Parshas? The general rule, which is accepted all around the Torah, is that every letter in the Torah is teaching us something.
The last time we were celebrating Hannah's birthday, and this time we're celebrating my birthday.
Well, yes, it was great to celebrate birthdays. We have this week's Parsha is the quandary that it's so many Mefarshim, so many commentaries ask. We've got an entire Parshas Pikudei, almost, plus last week's Parshas Vayakel, both of them. Just going on and on about what the Yiddish people were doing, how they were told to do it, and how they did it. Well, you could just sum it up in one word, which is repeated so many times anyway. They did, as Hashem commanded Moshe. Finished, end of the story. Doesn't that rule out the whole Parsha? If every line in the Parsha, and every word, and every letter is supposed to be so exact, what happened to this whole Parsha? What's this whole ongoing repetition all about? Especially because that line is already there. Now, you would expect a question like this, which is so glaringly obvious, to be addressed by commentaries. Why is the Parsha being repeated? And here is from Abarbanel, who actually brings up this question. Why is the information about the building of the Mishkan repeated again and again? The Torah tells us about the Mishkan and its vessels 5 times, sometimes in a brief summary, and other times in full detail, but the concept is repeated in 5 different steps. The question is most acute in these Torah portions. First, Moshe tells the Jewish people, every wise-hearted person amongst you shall come and make everything that Hashem has commanded. And then the verse goes on to list all the things they commanded to build. Then the Torah goes on to describe the actual construction of each individual element in full detail. So it's 3 times just in this week's Parsha. It should have been enough for the Torah to state, and Moshe related to all the children of Israel, all the work Hashem instructed about, and then sign off all the wise-hearted did as Moshe had commanded. Why is the need to relate the details again and again? That's a great question. It's a big question. Obviously, you can imagine there are good answers, but we're looking for an answer that works for us. And we're saying not just works for us that we get the answer, we also understand what the message of the repetition is. Okay. Now, that question is a great question. It's a basic question. We're going to question 2.0. Question on the question is, it's such a good question. Where's Rashi? Why is Rashi silent about this very basic question? How come Rashi doesn't give us an answer? Rashi rule number 1, as we start off, Rashi addresses every basic question in the text. It must be answered somewhere, somehow. Okay. Now, the truth is, Rashi actually makes it a little harder for himself, because Rashi in this week's Parsha says, I'm not going to comment on the details, all utensils in this week's Parsha, because all the laws of every detail, what needs to be made and how it should be made and exactly how to understand it, I've explained it all already, first time round. And therefore, I'm not going to explain it all again because you just look back there. Hold on, Rashi. So you've obviously noticed that this is a repeat. You've obviously realized you don't have to write your whole commentary again. So how about help us understand why the Torah didn't do the same thing? And Rashi, by commenting on that, you've got to help us understand why the Torah doesn't repeat, and why don't you repeat or explain why you're not repeating an understanding of why the Torah does. And that becomes the interesting opening, what becomes such a powerful message for real education in a day and age of when, I'm just going to mute here because I'm getting a little distraction. In a day and age of where we have challenges in education on every level. And I say education, we don't just mean school years. When we talk about educating people about what it means to walk into a shul, and that it's disrespectful to be talking in the middle of service. There are people who are adults, professionals, who would never talk in a courtroom. They wouldn't even talk in a cinema. but it doesn't enter the mind to think of shul as a place of worship, surah as a place of connecting to Hashem, or the like. And it's not like they mean anything bad. They really don't. They don't want to be disrespectful. But it's just a dissonance that takes place. It's just something that's a disconnect. There's so much that we can do to train ourselves. In a day like today, where distraction is the norm, where sound bites are too long to listen to because it's not quick enough and there's no moving pictures with it or whatever else it takes to keep our distracted minds somewhat focused or unfocused. This is the time where we must hear this message so loud. And the way we're going to learn this message is obviously from the fact that the Torah repeats it, but we're going to observe it. We're going to notice it from the fact that Rashi does not provide his answer here. He wants us to find the answer that he has already given to us previously. And the only way we're going to find the answer previously is if we properly understand how Rashi teaches us to see this week's Parsha. I'm going to jump the gun. I'm going to give you the answer, and then I'm going to make it so we didn't say it, and we're going to learn it inside. The answer is going to be, this week's Parsha is not here to teach us any laws. This Parsha is not here to teach us anything we did not know. Because if it was, then it would be the mitzvah of whatever the mitzvah is, building a house for Hashem, and the details of how each item should be made. We're not touching that here. And Rashi says to us, I'm not going to give you these details in this week's Parsha. Because this week's Parsha, I do not want to be teaching you laws. There's not about the technical details of everything we are reading. This week's Parsha is about just telling you the story I love. Just telling you again the story that's so dear to me, so uplifting and important, to borrow Mrs. Abrams' word. This is what the Parsha is talking about. And once we know that that's what the Parsha is talking about, we already have the answer from an earlier story. Let's start it from the beginning. Let's read what this week's Parsha says. Oh, I've got to click here. Every generous-hearted person, nediv liboy. Nediv lev means generous heart. Someone who is a nediv lev, a generous-hearted person, is what the Torah talks about in this week's Parsha multiple times. Because his or her heart motivates them to be generous, they are called generous-hearted. I have already explained the account of its contributions to the Mishkan and the deeds of its construction in the passage where the instructions were given. Notice, right at this point, at the opening of this week's Parsha, Rashi says, I only want to explain to you, Nediv Lev means generous-hearted people, people whose hearts are just so full of generosity. That's what we're talking about in this week's Parsha, and I'm not going to give you any of the details in the construction. That I've already told you when the instructions were given to Moshe. Of course, this is the Rashi that we were talking about. The Rashi, we're not going to say put his foot in his mouth, but Rashi exasperates the problem because he points out that it's already a repeat, but doesn't tell us what's missing. Now we're going to say the answer is in this Rashi itself. Rashi wants us to notice it's not a parsha of laws. It's a parsha that talks about people. Their hearts are so full of generosity. That's what the parsha is talking about. Let's keep going through this. The Mishkan was long awaited. The Mishkan was the fulfillment of creation's purpose, God's presence, dwelling amongst us. To have Hashem amongst us is what the Mishkan was designed to do. I think the imagery is supposed to be where heaven and earth meet. So we raise up ourselves just as high as we can get. And Hashem lowers himself to be on that playing field and to meet us there. I'm not sure exactly how the cloud is where we live, but yes, that's the idea. And this is what the Mishkan was designed to do. That's the Mishkan then, the house for Hashem. And of course, in a personal level, it's the same idea of every time we want to get involved in our personal Yiddishkeit, and I use the word not just Yiddishkeit, but our personal Yiddishkeit, is because it's our journey. Of course, we can be a card-bearing member, and we can be, you might call it from, you might call it a member of a shul, you might call yourself a different label, whatever you want to call it. Those are labels. We're not talking about that. We're talking about being on my journey, connecting to Hashem. There's only one God, but I need to connect to Hashem on my level and journey on my journey, my next step, and my next best step, and become the best me I can become. That journey is exactly the same idea, where I raise myself up to the highest height I can, and I know if this is the best I can do today, Hashem will meet me here, and His presence dwells with me. And tomorrow I'm going to push forward, and Hashem will meet me there. And as I push myself forward, I connect to Hashem in my own journey more and more. That's the idea of a Mishkan. If that's the idea of the Mishkan, we can now understand that it's not going to be just technical. It's going to, very importantly, we have to follow the rules. The rules are very important. And they will be the first important thing. We're going to learn the rules. But that's not it. The rules are the framework people to live in. Let's read a quote from the Alter Rebbe in the Pikudei Torah. The function of the Mishkan was to facilitate Hashem's presence dwelling amongst the Jewish people, as the verse states, and they shall make me a Mishkan, and I will dwell among them. The sages also spoke of this when they said Hashem desired to have a home for himself in the lower realms. By the way, this became one of the most fundamental building blocks of all Chabad Hasidic philosophy. But this world is where it's at. And the purpose of the most lofty angels and high celestial planes, in order that in this world we should find Hashem. We are it. We are the purpose. We are the apple of the eye. In the lower realms, which means us, we should make a home for Hashem. And we're going to talk about the difference between a house and a home. How do you make a house into a home? That's what we need to do. But before we do that, the question is that the verse states that regardless of all this, I, Hashem, fill the heavens and earth. So what purpose did the Mishkan serve? Why do we need a home? If Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, so why do we need a home? He's everywhere anyhow. And the answer is that a home means a place where godliness is revealed. This must be specifically in the lower realms. Revealed means that the presence is felt. It's expressed. And that can only take place not in the angel's life, not in the high spiritual beings, because those will all be different, higher and greater levels of creation, but creation all the same. The most powerful angel is still only a creation. And creation means concealment. Creation means that Hashem hides His infinity and allows a being to exist. That's what creation is, right? And therefore, as lofty as the greatest angel or the greatest high madrega might be, that is concealment. The only creation that actually reveals godliness in its truest form is the purpose of it all. The purpose of all creation, which is the end of the chain, where everything's said and done, is when a human being, a speck on planet Earth, in the Milky Way, in the universe of whatever, when that speck, which is us, does a mitzvah and pushes ourselves and bends ourselves and stretches ourselves to be able to do what Hashem wants, that is revelation. That is godliness in its most revealed state. We might not experience it yet ourselves, but we know that to be the purpose of all creation. Says the Alter Rebbe, keep scrolling, here we go. Lower here doesn't mean down, lower place in the physical sense, because God is beyond limitations of space. We're not further away from Hashem, and if we go up the mountain, we'll get closer. In this context, higher and lower refer to their spiritual level. Our lowly world is spiritually the lowest of all, the least godly. The final link in the chain of worlds. Final meaning the least godly link in the chain of worlds. And this is why godliness is heavily concealed in this world, and it is filled with darkness. By design, this world is the least godly world. God desired to dwell and reveal himself specifically in this world and illuminate its darkness. This is where it's at. It says the Alter Rebbe, Mishkan. Mishkan, that's what creation is all about. Mishkan isn't when we go off to some spiritual bliss. Mishkan is when we find a way to make dreariness or otherwise mundaneness, just coarseness of real reality, become godly. This is Mishkan. Okay, now if this is what Mishkan is, we can understand. We're going to skim through this. The Frierdiker Rebbe has his famous Maimah, the Basi Lagani Maimah, in which he describes this world being Hashem's personal private garden. Basi Lagani quotes from Shlomo HaMelech and goes on to explain that Hashem dwelled in this world. This was the home for Hashem until he was made uncomfortable here by creation not making a home for Hashem, kicking him out of the home, telling Hashem, you're not welcome here. Starting off with the sin of the tree of knowledge and then going on to Cain and Enosh and all the different sins that took place made Hashem feel less and less welcome until eventually the righteous people came one by one, starting with Avraham Avinu and then Yitzchak and then Yaakov, and said, Hashem, actually, welcome back. We're going to make this world welcoming for you. And eventually, the seventh generation was Moshe Rabbeinu, who built the Mishkan. And at the time of the Mishkan, finally, the presence of Hashem came back. And we described, and the Jewish people experienced the presence of Hashem coming back. It was like the lights went on in the whole world, because the purpose of creation has been actualized to a very large extent. Hashem's presence was made welcome back here. Hashem was back home in a lowly world. The least godly link in creation had welcomed Hashem back. That is Mishkan. Now we understand that actually that was the Mishkan in general. The Mishkan in its particular form is the same idea. As Rashi tells us, the people who lived at that time had their own need to bring Hashem back. The Mishkan was called Mishkan Ha'edus. Edus means, Edut is testimony. What were we testifying about? And what did the Mishkan provide testimony for? The Edus or the Mishkan testified to the Jews that Hashem had forgiven them for the construction of the golden calf, the worst sin they'd ever committed, because his presence was now dwelling amongst them, says Rashi. Now we understand that Mishkan, in its basic sense, was a demonstration that Hashem wants to be amongst the people, even after the terrible sin. And on a more global sense, Mishkan is the concept of making Hashem welcome back into his world. And now with this appreciation, we can now understand why Rashi doesn't need to even comment about the repetition. And the Torah insists on repeating the whole story as many times as you possibly can. It's like you looking for every excuse to say the story again and again. Why so? This is the idea. The Mishkan and its vessels were of critical importance to the Jewish people as they facilitated the dwelling of the divine presence amongst the Jewish people. This is what we lived for. This is who we were. This is who we are. The Mishkan is everything about us. This is our story, not just one of our stories. This is it. This explains the great fondness both Hashem and the Jewish people had for the Mishkan. And this is the reason why the Torah lists all of the elements of the Mishkan again and again in great detail. And this, says Rashi, I don't want you to think there are any laws to be taught here. Because what the Torah is teaching us here is not about laws. Because if it's about laws, we're about to learn, we're going to quote Rashi from back in Bereshis. When it comes to the laws, the Torah is absolutely fine writing the most complex laws in loaded one-liners. succinctly written, one word could be a game changer for 15 halachas. No problem, because it's halacha. And it's for the great minds and scholars to decipher, and it's very technical, it's very important, and every detail matters, but it doesn't need a lot of space in the Torah. Torah is the book of instruction. If I can teach you the instructions with one word, I'll teach you with one word. But when I want to tell you how something is precious, when I want to demonstrate, put your heart in it, you cannot spend time quickly. And the Torah teaches us how precious our Mishkan is to Hashem. And how precious Hashem's Mishkan is to us. It just uses every non-excuse to use as many words and as many extra verses and more, and just say more about it. Talk about it. Because if you're talking about it, you care about it. And if you don't care about it, you're going to talk about it more, you'll care about it more. This is the story. This is the story of this week's Parsha. Put your passion into where it really belongs. That cannot be said in one word, and it can't even be said as an instruction. You can't tell somebody, be passionate. You could demonstrate to somebody and lead by example, and the Torah does exactly that. The only thing we have to realize is that it's not about technical law now. The technical law we got in Parshas Teruma and Tetzaveh. We do have to know this is about Nativ Liboy being fully, heartily into this. Fascinating. The answer, the Torah repeats information about the Mishkan because it's so important and essential to everything the Torah is about. The Torah delights in emphasizing it. Here's the quote from the Rashi early in Bereshis. Rav Acha said, by the way, this is the answer why Rashi doesn't have to say it here because he's already taught us this rule. The rule is that if it's something that we're passionate about, we'll spend loads of time talking about it, even though when it comes to laws, we only say minimalistic. Because passion is so important. It cannot be taught by instruction. It's taught by example. Rav Acha said the conversation of the patriarch's servants is held in higher esteem by God than the Torah discourses of the children, the halachas. This is evidenced by the fact that the story of Eliezer, because he's finding the shidduch for Yitzchak, he's building the future generation. Avraham, the first forefather, is creating the concept of parents making another generation. Not easy. It could be so rough and tough. It could make you Meshiga 5 times over and more. And the Torah says this is so precious. This is so precious. Being able to journey from one generation to the next is so high esteem. The Torah repeated the story of Eliezer again and again. Whereas many principles of the Torah, mitzvahs of the Torah, were given only through allusions in the text. This is the idea. Because if it's teaching us technicalities, whatever it takes, minimalistic, no problem. You're going to get it? It's enough. But passion, which really, where your heart lies, that has to be done. And this explains Rashi's science. Rashi does not need to comment on the repetition of the Mishkan information because it's already explained by his early comment on a similar question, and by the lack of Rashi's comment, we all of a sudden appreciate how passionate we should be about our personal Mishkan. Just want to open. Here we go. When you are excited about something, you'll spend time talking about it, even when it's not practical. And this is what we are being asked to do. Okay, this is a quote from Ara Loshak. Everyone gets excited about something. Everyone has a passion of some sort, whether it's football, whether it's money, whether it's art. It's boring for some, it's exciting for others. If your sports passion is red hot and your Judaism passion is pale and white, that's not great. And therefore, we have to put our heart in it. In Div Lev, if we throw our hearts into it and become passionately involved, our Judaism will indeed become the story we are always telling. And this is the call to action. The call to action is exactly that. And for the very short story, just to summarize it, Shimon Posner. My grandmother came to America from Russia with a 4-year stop in Israel. And she and her husband, 2 infant boys, settled in a Jewish neighborhood in New Jersey. The older boy in the neighborhood welcomed my son by snatching the yarmulkes off the heads, made them feel extremely unimportant. Life was rough and tough. She meets the Frierdiker Rebbe, Berzitzuk, who had just survived all sorts, and he comes to America. And the grandmother, his grandmother, comes by with her two Pitzkele children, and she's a 2-year-old in her arm, a 3-year-old holding her other hand, and she's at her race, and she bursts out crying. She says, "How will I raise children in such a hard land? What's going to be?" The Rebbe smiled so widely he was almost laughing. She thought that her and was insulted. The hard land, he considered, growing serious. But in this land, you will raise gute Yiddish Chassidische Kinder. In her later years, she had dementia. She didn't have a memory anymore. But she would tell the story with its full emotion. And then 10 minutes later, she'd say the same story again. Not missing the slightest detail with the slightest emotion. And guess what? This was the story of her life. She would always end the story by saying, "I did not let that blessing sit. I put it to work." The Rebbe had given her a blessing that she would raise Hasidic children. It became her story. And she lived with it and worked with it. I'm going to say slaved, but she worked very hard to bring up those kids. And guess what? Boy, did she succeed. I don't think she ever lost her initial enthusiasm. I think if she had, she would never have been the person she was. In these two parshas, the Torah told us the details of the tabernacle, the portal section, the sockets, the whole business. The exhaustive repetition begs explanation until we notice two words: nediv, liboy. Put your heart in it. And when your heart's in it, that's how we will convince ourselves, and we will be able to pass it on to the next generation. This is where it's at. We will read these portions, we will think they are redundant, but remember that bringing heaven to earth demands not technical, that also, but a passion of the heart that allows for no redundancy. We will repeat it and again with a passion that is not abated. Hashem should give us the courage to repeat our stories to ourselves and don't get burnt out. Hashem was listening to us and he's cheering us on. Be'ez Hashem, we will see the excitement of the success of doing the good things we're doing, the toiv v'nirav v'nigra, in the best possible way. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Should be a good Chodesh Adar and a good Shabbos Mavarchim, Shabbos HaChodesh. Don't forget, it's Rabbi Tzimchaim Moshke's birthday tonight. And come Shabbos, Erev Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos Mavarchim, and all the good things. Chodesh HaGeula and the rest. Thank you for joining, everyone.